Hey guys, my name is Blake, and I'm trying something new. This is the first, call it, episode of a series that I'm going to try to do called "What My Startup Taught Me This Week." So in my last startup, Cladwell, I did this video. Those 70 lessons I learned in 7 years as a founder and CEO, and I feel like it was really well received, and I had a lot of feedback that it was very helpful. So I kind of wondered what would it look like to do this on a weekly basis as opposed to only once every 7 years. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So each week, as we're starting this new company called Boilerplate, which you can look that up and find out what that's about, but on a more macro level, each week I'm going to try to just kind of consolidate what did I learn. Because I do think that running a startup is great in that it's like a front row seat to a lot of mistakes that you end up making on a weekly basis. You make a ton of different mistakes, and if you can learn from those mistakes, I think it's really, really powerful. Sometimes you get a little crushed by them, but hopefully we can learn from them. So this is, even for me, maybe helpful just to make sure that I'm like seeing these things as learning, as opposed to seeing things as failure or correction or something like that. So yeah, I guess we'll just get started. I just wanted to go through this week. I kind of listed out, kind of upon reflection, like 5 things that I feel like I learned this week. So yeah, hopefully we'll keep on doing this series. But if nobody's watching it or finding it useful, I'll probably stop, as one should, in my opinion. So all right, here we go. Lesson number 1: don't do stretch goals. They take away from the base goal. So we set kind of a stretch goal this week of like, I wanted to get landing page up for Boilerplate. We wanted to get all these other landing pages set up so that everything would flow together, and then also have like a free giveaway if you sign up to like learn more about Boilerplate, that you could also get this like IP checklist. And so essentially it was way too much work to do in a 3-day period. I set the goal on Friday, and then we're like, this has to be live by noon on Tuesday, because I was going to be doing this seminar. And so we kind of set that was the goal that we were going to try to do. And I kind of looked at it. I said, okay, well, these 3 are really important, and the remaining 4 are stretch goals. So if we can get them, that'd be great, but we don't have to. I think the way that's interpreted, if you put the goal in front of people, then it's now the goal. And what ended up happening was of course, we accomplished everything, including the stretch goals, but I think in some ways at the detriment to the things that really mattered. So we did all of them okay, as opposed to if we had narrowed down and said this is the one thing that really matters, I think we would have done it in a more excellent way, and it probably would have been more effective. And it's just like a reminder that like I think this concept of a stretch goal versus a goal is, I think it's a lack of prioritization in sheep's clothing. So prioritize it, get really clear on what needs to happen, and say, let's do this. And if we do that, then that's enough. The stretch goal thing, I don't think it sets people up for great work, and it almost removes the opportunity for somebody to exceed your expectations. And that's kind of lame for that person. So yeah, there's a learning this week. Okay, lesson number 2, activity breeds opportunity. Said another way, you should post things online, and you should speak at things if you're a startup founder or trying to meet other people or find opportunities. It seems like a really basic sort of learning, but it was really illustrated a lot this week. I spoke at a thing on Tuesday talking about how to raise angel money. And as a result, had a bunch of different emails come in of people wanting to find out more about Boilerplate, or wanting to get together and talk about coaching, or like all this opportunity comes out of just a 1-hour web seminar. And actually some of the opportunity came not because they were even in that thing, but just because they were reminded that I existed as a person because they saw a post that was promoting it. And so like I think especially as a founder, but I think probably in most roles, if you can just have some level of visible activity, it greatly increases the odds that you're going to find the people you need to find or get the opportunities that you need to find. Because there's just something about it's like entering into the marketplace. And I think that the internet, and specifically like LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, is the marketplace now. And so you need to just be visible in that place in order to get the opportunities. And that was kind of cool to see that, and kind of like a good reminder. And I think the reason that it felt like an aha to me is probably because I think I've often discounted that type of stuff, or even this type of thing that I'm doing right now, as like self-aggrandizement or self-promotion. And there's a lot of that in the startup world. And I don't know, I think it's kind of gross, and you can tell if somebody's getting a lot of benefit personally, and everybody gets a little bit of benefit from promoting themselves, but like I don't know. I think that there's a difference between like being helpful publicly and trying to take and trying to just like promote yourself. And I would say promoting yourself is not as helpful as just like being helpful publicly. And I think when you do that, a lot of good things come right back at you, and people want to work with you. So do that thing. And I think there's a lot more room for people to be doing that thing. It's like helpful. Dave Wilbrand does this really well. I don't know if you guys, he's our lawyer and we're partnering with him on Boilerplate. And he's just like every day putting just an interesting thought on LinkedIn. And it's I've never seen him post anything about himself as a lawyer. It's like about just interesting things. But he's like top of mind. He dominates my LinkedIn feed. And I've got like thousands of people in there, but he dominates it because he's just kind of like connecting out into the public sphere. And there's a lot more room for us to be doing this. So yeah, do that. All right, lesson number 3. This is an interesting one. Equity splits don't actually affect team motivation. And I've talked about that in the past in other videos, but equity splits don't affect team motivation. If you have 20% equity or 30% equity or 2% equity or 4% equity, there's actually, I've not seen that has any effect on how people are motivated and how hard people work. People are typically intrinsically motivated and they just work because they take pride in their work. The reason you give people equity should be for other reasons other than to motivate them or control them. However, second half of the lesson is they do affect the team's perception of the other person. And so literally us and the Ridenauers, the Smiths and the Ridenauers, are splitting Boilerplate 50-50. And Y Combinator kind of recommends doing that, and I think I'm beginning to see that, see why we're doing that. In our last company, he and I were not split 50-50. So I kind of have like an A/B test where like it was a pretty different gap in terms of equity distribution in our last company, same people. Now in this one it's 50-50. And my perception of our relationship is that I don't feel like I need to be pushing him to go forward, or Nikki to go forward. In fact, I trust very strongly that they're pushing it forward because they have as much skin in the game as I do. Which is funny because intellectually I know that equity doesn't motivate people, but it affects me knowing that they have that. That's a weird little cognitive dissonance thing, right? Like where I'm being inconsistent, but I think many people are inconsistent in that way, that if you know what someone has, it changes how you view their work or their skin in the game. And I've heard this, that was actually in Y Combinator, why they recommend doing 50-50 splits, is that if you don't, it actually communicates to the VCs that you're pitching or to future investors who has more value in the organization. And you're essentially kind of damaging that person if you reduce their equity as a co-founder. Yeah, so just know that when you're allocating equity, it doesn't really affect how hard they're going to work, but it does affect how you're going to view their skin in the game. That was a cool lesson. Lesson number 4, he or she who runs the whiteboard runs the meeting. And that is different than running a piece of paper. This happened twice this week. One was like a kind of like local meeting in the neighborhood here at my home, and then another was a business meeting where kind of the meeting kicks off in a little bit of disarray and it feels kind of chaotic, and then you can feel kind of the angst in the midst of that as we're trying to define the problem. And then in one instance I actually ran out of the room and I grabbed a big whiteboard and brought it back out, and from that point on the meeting was going to and did go the direction that I wanted it to go. And I'd say that if you are at the whiteboard, you have a much larger control in the outcome of the meeting and the focus of the meeting. And you don't have to be dominant or weird or aggressive in that, but it's if you hold that little dry erase marker pen, you actually can shape the direction the meeting's going to go in a way that you can't through your words or your posture without it. So 2 things from that. One is like, if you want to see a good outcome, you should get to the whiteboard. 2, if someone else is at the whiteboard, make sure that you trust them as the steward of the meeting, because their agenda is going to be done. Yeah, it's just there's a reason there's whiteboards in all these offices. They work. So yeah. Lesson number 5 and last. Any more than 5 in a week seems like too much in my opinion. So all right, lesson number 5. When it comes to raising money, the more meetings you take, the more dollars you will raise. I was talking about this with Tanya Soman from 500 Startups, and it was just in my observation in coaching folks through fundraising that there is a one-to-one relationship between the amount of money that you raise and the amount of meetings you have. There is not a one-to-one relationship between the quality of the meetings, the quality of the founding team, quality of the company, or the pitch. Those things have vast variability with different outcomes. But people who get a lot of meetings raise the money. People who don't. And so, said shortly, it's a numbers game. And so talking about the number of numbers, I always say if you're raising angel funding, from non-institutional investors, you should expect each pitch is worth $5,000. So if you're raising $500,000 in angel money, then you need to do 100 pitches. That's what a lot is. You actually need to do 100 in about a 1 month to 6 week long period. You need to do 100 pitches in a row. And if you actually do that, which most people don't actually do that, but if you actually do that, you will raise the money. Because you'll hone the pitch through the process, and you'll learn people's objections and learn to circumnavigate them before they come. Similar dynamic is with venture funding. If you want to raise, I'd say that each venture pitch is worth $10,000. So if you're this is for seed, and so if you're raising $2 million in seed, you need to have 200 pitches. And that's just been my track record. I sure hope that you have a much better track record than I do, but that was my conversion rate. I'm just seeing it more and more because I think I'm coaching multiple startups at the same time through their fundraising process, and I'm just seeing that there's a difference between the person who gets the meetings and the person who doesn't. And the person who gets the meetings gets the money. Most of it comes down to like administrative work and a willingness to send emails to people and risk maybe them being irritated. And that's crazy that millions of dollars are being allocated based on that skill set. But it's what happens. So it was really seared in my psyche this week observing that. So those are my 5 lessons. Lesson number 1, don't do stretch goals. They take away from the base goal. Lesson number 2, activity breeds opportunity. Number 3, equity splits don't affect team motivation, but they do affect team perception. Number 4, run the whiteboard, run the meeting. And number 5, when raising money, more meetings equals more dollars. That's pretty much it. You can subscribe here on YouTube or on Medium. I think on Anchor, I'm going to be doing the podcast, which will distribute it to Spotify and iTunes. And also, if you can subscribe on Allsmith, then it'll come to your email. So allsmith.org. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next week.